Aristotle is an important figure in the ongoing discussion that we've been following about the relation of nature to civilization, or the human mind. He's determined to use nature as his point of departure and to determine its scope as precisely as possible. This leads him to present a picture of human beings and society as largely determined by fixed natural forces, although he does recognize the role of human convention as well. His views about slavery are perhaps the most strikingly offensive to our modern intuitions. We all know people who are not so good at organizing their own lives. Some are impulsive and make bad decisions. Some are incapable of thinking ahead or planning for the future. Some do not consider the consequences of their actions. One might well argue that people like this would indeed be well served by having someone else look after them and to help them manage their affairs. Why people develop in ways like this is difficult to know exactly, but today most of us regard these character traits as things that arise in the course of a person's upbringing and development, and not as a fact of nature, something determined from birth. Moreover, even if we were to grant this, for the sake of argument, the inference that Aristotle draws from this, namely that they should be slaves, seems outrageous. Today, when we see people with mental illness or physical handicaps that prevent them from managing their affairs entirely on their own, they're given help by family members or professionals so that they can function as well as possible. Nobody would argue that they should be deprived of all their rights regarded as legal property of another person. How did Aristotle end up with such a view that seems so outrageous to us today? It might be argued that this is in part the fault of his empiricism. He observes the world around him and tries to determine the nature of the individual phenomena that he sees, including those related to human behavior and affairs. In his world, he doubtless saw and interacted with many slaves. He observed them in their interactions with their owners and with each other. He presumably saw how slaves looked to their masters for the next command about what was to be done. He did not see slaves taking the initiative themselves and organizing things on their own. Based on this, he drew the inference that they were by nature determined to be ruled. Seen from this perspective, the observed behavior of the slaves would seem to vindicate his view that some people by nature need others to rule over them. But this fails to appreciate that the slaves are simply playing the role that has been forced upon them. If they were at their liberty to act as they wished, they would presumably have no problem at all making decisions, taking initiative, and determining things for themselves. So here, Aristotle's empiricism gave him a false picture of human nature, since he was only making his observations in slave states. If he had seen our modern society, he would have realized that most all people are perfectly capable of ruling their own affairs in his sense, without the need to be ruled by others. So empiricism is only a valuable tool to the extent that its sample group is genuinely representative. Aristotle's theory about the natural order of things with regard to slaves, women, and children makes it clear how far we've come in our conceptions of freedom, individuality, and subjectivity. In his time, these ideas were only beginning to emerge, and it took centuries for them to develop into the ideas that we today regard as common sense. The slave trade, the Holocaust, the destruction of the indigenous populations of the New World, and the many other great crimes of Western civilization testify to the long and painful road that this has been.